I was very kindly given a snowdrop which cost £450. And when I went in the spring to have a look at my site where it was, in its lattice pot, I found a very neat hole.
Oh.
And it had been dug up by a squirrel, I think, and replaced by a conker. And I looked, it's not funny, Thordis, not funny.
We have had absolutely stupendous snowdrop show and tell. Loads, just a whole raft of varieties we've never spoken about on the podcast, and lots of inspiration there. And of course, the great thing about your garden, anyone who doesn't know, who doesn't follow your Galanthaholic Instagram, might think it's some sort of snowdrop focused world. It's this monoculture of snowdrops. But you know, you have so many plants throughout the year, and obviously at this time of year you've got all these wonderful neighbours that sit alongside the snowdrops as well.
Yes, there are one or two. So these, as you know, we call winter hostas. You would know it as Arum italicum or cuckoo pint, lords and ladies, lots of vernacular names. And this one is one which is quite a reasonably small size. This is at maximum size, I think, for this plant. This is one called Tiny, and it arose in, according to Elizabeth Strangland, who is a very good plantswoman, it arose in E.A. Bowles' garden at Middleton House. So that it's nice to have it for that history, really. So that's a small one, and it's the variegation which is rather nice. And there are a lot of Arums now, and they're becoming more available, but they are slow to increase. So, you know, it's difficult to find them. This one is a little different. I'm very carefully holding them with kitchen paper because otherwise it'll go all over the computer, and I don't want that. And you can see that that's Tiny, and that one, that is Monksilver.
Oh, I thought that was Monksilver. I have Monksilver.
Which of course comes from Joe Sharman, who's often on the podcast, and he does a lot of work with Arums and is a good source of them. Lovely plant, quite silvery leaf, quite different in size. So a good one to grow, makes a nice clump quite quickly.
Yeah, nice and vigorous.
This one is called Chameleon.
Oh!
Because it's very variegated. It's got lots of splashes on it, and virtually every leaf is different. And so that's again is a bit bigger than this, quite a lot wider, trying to get them both together, and a different shape. You know, it's almost a wide triangle, whereas that one is an arrowhead. And there is quite a nice one I've got called Breiteseite. It's a German one, and it's very wide. But then I think what my absolute favourite is this one. It's massive, absolutely massive. And they're incredible plants. I mean, I don't know whether you knew this, Alan, but they've got thermogenesis in the spathe. So
please explain, Brian.
I'll try. The spathe gets warmer in cold weather to attract insects for pollination, because of course they are flowering, as it were, at a time when it is cold. So they produce their own heat in the flower to attract the plant, the insects, and get pollinated. And in that really awful -7 and beyond that we've had recently, this particular one I'm going to show you, it looked like wilted spinach. But then it came up again and all expanded into this, which, as you can see, compared with that one, is quite different. And this one came from Belgium, again before Brexit, unfortunately. And this one is called Hungarian Rhapsodie. And I don't know how many people are actually growing it.
That is glorious. It's bigger than your head. That leaf is bigger than your head.
Yeah. I expect Joe has got his eye on it, I expect.
It almost looks, the patterning on that leaf, like when you do an aerial shot of one of these sort of floodplains in Africa or something, when the water starts to spread out across the land and you get those rivulets.
Yeah.
The patterning on the leaf is wonderful.
It's incredible. And it's, it stands, what, 8 inches tall, I suppose. And to begin with, it was no bigger than an ordinary arum. And I thought, oh, well, it's very pretty, but, it's distinct. But that's about all you can say. And then it started to grow. Like all these things. And then I thought I'd better go up a bit. So more water, more danger with the computer. We know this one, yes.
Yes, Amy Doncaster.
Ribes laurifolium, Amy Doncaster, which is a lovely thing to grow with snowdrops as background. And I'm very keen on having lots of plants to grow with the snowdrops, as you know, and lots of taller plants as well as shorter plants, because lots of the bigger ones also you get a touch of scent. I
do love that Ribes Amy Doncaster. I don't have it, but it's so kind of elegant. My Ribes is, it's a showstopper. It's fabulous, but it's very in your face when it comes out, which is later. But that one, it's so charming.
It can be a scrambly old thing, a messy grower, yes. But I've got it at the base of a north wall, and it where I can haul it back on. I can tie the stems back to the wall, and if you tie them and arrange them, they look so much nicer.
Yes, yeah. John Morley's got one on the end of the house, hasn't he?
Yes.
And he has it tight in, and yeah. I prune mine particularly to keep it against the fence.
Yeah.
Because we just haven't got the room, as you know. And of course, I grow it near Snowdrop Amy Doncaster.
Of course you do.
Everybody knows Hamamelis.
Yep.
Which you should grow for winter colour, of course, and scent. And that's just the ordinary common or garden one. But I mean, you get such a variety. I showed an orange one on Instagram the other day, and this one is much redder and is beginning to clump up. A lot of the breeding was done at Carmtut Arboretum, I think, and they have a huge variety there. And actually, if you get ones that in the garden which are grafted, they're quite often, I think, granted on the original Virginiali, is it? And that will grow from the base. So you have to watch it and take those off. Otherwise, they will take.
It's happened here with one of mine in particular that I didn't see because it's growing in with other shrubs. I didn't see until it was almost too late that the rootstock was growing, and of course the rootstock is much stronger than the graft. So you've got to watch that, because otherwise it will take over.
Yeah, and then you've lost the really nice one, haven't you?
Yeah.
And that's the same with that red one. There were bits growing from the base which I've dug down and taken off.
And out of interest, how do you place that red one? Because I absolutely love the darker coloured Hamamelis, but then I think it's so easy to lose them in the garden. And the Cambridge University Botanic Gardens winter garden, they've got Jelena, however you say, the lovely orange one. And they
Jelena.
place that really nicely because they have obviously got a lot of space, so they can place it against sort of other coloured plants, corner stems or whatever, to try and complement and allow those flowers to shine. And it's quite hard. They can kind of get a bit lost unless you've got a good backdrop for them.
Well, I'm afraid we haven't really got a good backdrop because it's backed by the fence, and so all you've got is wooden fence behind it with plants growing up it. So I mean, it's got a bit of a green background.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful red one called Kohankie Red.
Lovely name. I think it's not Robin.
Diane?
Yes, Diane.
Ah,
It's
Diane.
Diane. But Jelena is named after the person who bred them at Galanthus. His wife was Jelena, and there are others named after members of the family as well. So there's, quite a selection of them.
Yeah, I do covet Jelena. I do want Jelena in my life. I'm just not sure where I'd put Jelena.
Well, the wonderful thing about Hamamelis is they are virtually trouble-free apart from taking off their suckers, because they don't really like being pruned. So they are a kind of shrub that needs space, if you can give it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the red one seems less prone to getting rangy. And I always prune them after they've flowered and take off half of the new growth on every stem so that it keeps it to a decent size for our garden.
Oh, you are a stern master, Brian.
I am. I'm almost as bad as Chopper Ruth.
Ian Ruth.
Right.
Oh.
This delicate little thing, I had to have this. Do you know it, Alan?
Yes, it's a Lonicera.
It is indeed. And it's Lonicera Ellis.
Yeah.
I wonder why I had to have it. It was introduced by Roy Lancaster, which I didn't realise. And the synonym is Infundibulum varrockii.
Oh, I prefer Ellisii.
Far easier to remember, isn't it?
Indeed.
John and Judy got a lovely one.
Yeah, they have.
Haven't they? In their drive.
That's where I first saw it, which made me get it.
Me too. Guilty as charged. And then lastly on those, it's almost in flower. Just beginning to.
Daphne.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I bet that smells lovely.
And of course it does. And it's Daphne Belua, Jacqueline Postill, of course.
No, Brian, those Daphne Beluas are, and I mean, there's lots of named forms, and I've got some forms that don't have names because they're seedlings that I grew. And I've got a couple that are much earlier than the others, and they're very white in flower, but they drop almost all of their leaves. Now, I don't know whether it's this particular year where it's been so cold, but you're almost going back to the original species, because the original species, it used to drop its leaves, and it was deciduous, wasn't it?
Yes. You've gone on to my FLOMO, really.
Oh,
Still,
I
it
am
can
so
be
sorry.
edited,
Well, let's
can't
skip over that. We'll carry on.
Tease ahead. Hold us in a moment of hiatus.
No, really, I mean, that's showing shrubs. You've seen the snowdrops. There's one other plant that I want to show you, and that's this one. Take the label out so I know what it is. Do you know these, Alan?
No, I don't know what that is. It's
Oh,
very handsome.
Really?
Yes.
It is handsome, isn't it?
It is extremely handsome.
I foxed him. It's Rhodia.
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 Yeah.
Well, I don't like to say Rhodia because it reminds me of the
I know what you mean.
So it's Rhodia, and this one is called Talbot Manor.
Oh, well, yes. A good name.
A very good name, because it was obviously a rose in Norfolk at Fincham,
Yep.
at Talbot Manor, where Maurice Mason was the most incredible, amazing gardener and collector of plants. Absolutely incredible. Begonia Masonii is named
Yes.
after him.
Do you remember the tale, Brian, when he showed that begonia at Chelsea, I think it was? Nobody had it. He introduced it, and every little piece of cutting was pinched off it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had a very large garden when he moved to Larch Wood.
Yeah.
And he used to drive through it in his, I think it was a Daimler or a Bentley, I can't remember which.
Yeah.
At the end of his life, he was incapacitated, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people used to drive him round and stop and show you the plants. And Lady Priscilla Bacon was one of the people who was in the car once, and he didn't like the cold. He was a bit like me. So he didn't like the cold, and he smoked cigars. And so this Daimler was getting absolutely heated up, full of cigar smoke, and she wound the window down, and he wasn't at all pleased. I forget what she said. So there's another thing I want to say about snowdrops, because if you remember last time, I made a massive blooper and said that Hayrick Greatorex had bred all these Shakespeare ladies from crossing two snowdrops, and I got them wrong. Don't know why. Nerves, I expect. But
We are very nerve-wracking.
Hayrick Greatorex crossed plicatus with the double form of nivalis, and that's how he got them all. And in that podcast, I said that everybody was desperate to see what he looked like, because nobody knew what he looked like. And he lived in this funny little house. And then this has just reminded me, talking about Maurice Mason, because I did an article in this book, Enticing Paths, because in it, there's an article by our friend Richard Hobbs, and we'll get the outside. There is Hayrick Greatorex, who was known to his family as Tony Greatorex, and his house. So that was quite interesting, I thought.
With right, I'm going on him.
I'm going off piste a little bit, because there's another thing I want to say. This is how I label my snowdrops. You can see that it's a long label. It's 8 inches, and it gets put in the ground, as you know, to about that much, so the birds can't get them out, and so it doesn't look like lots of tombstones all over the garden. And it's printed. And I know in a podcast or two back, Alan said about these handheld printers and how they were terribly fiddly, and I found that. And then I found this, and this is by the same people, and it is attached to your computer, and you can touch type, well, because I'm a touch typist, so you can type out the name on your computer, which is far easier, and then print it out the end there.
Or if you're Alan, you could delegate. You could delegate the typing.
I've got to know the make of this thing. I mean, this is wonderful.
It's a Brother, and it's a P-Touch. And the reason I got it was quite a few years ago now. We went to see, it's all snowdrops, you know. It was a garden near Birmingham called Woodpeckers. And there's a snowdrop called Woodpeckers, which was, you know, not the whole reason for going, because it was the wrong time of year. But it's where this snowdrop had originated. It's a little yellow one. It's a lovely little thing. And it was the garden of Andrew and Lally Cox. And they were terribly good gardeners, sadly no longer with us. And I think their garden has been split up, although I think Jackie, the daughter, may have part of it. And we were looking around the garden, and it was full of trees and shrubs and all sorts of herbaceous stuff. And lots of these labels were on the trees. And there were black labels with this printing on. And I thought, oh, they look rather smart. They look, reasonably new. So I said to Andy Cox, they're really nice labels. How long have you had those? He said, oh, years, he said. And they were, 10, 15 years old, and they still looked as good as that. In fact, the thing that didn't look good, or quite so good, was the label, because it was beginning to fade. The actual label, not the title, the label was fading. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
So out of interest, where do you get, we need to know about the whole caboodle. So the label, I assume you get the actual printing label bit from Brother.
You do get the printing label bit from Brother. They're not cheap, but then you're only going to do it once, aren't you?
They're only bulbs, Brian.
They're only bulbs. They're only labels. These particular labels are not my normal ones. These are a bit more bendy, and they come from the Essential Company, which is in Pulham Market. The Essentials Company. Very good for all sorts of garden supplies. But the ones that I usually use are from Wells and Winter, because they are thicker and more substantial. Lots of people would have them sticking up out of the ground, and of course they would snap if you walked into them and things like that. But because I have them low down, I know that they're going to last a long time.
I am so glad you brought the labels up, because when I came to your garden, I wrote down all these notes about your label machine and everything, which that is somewhere.
Oh, really?
I have notes on this somewhere, but
I've got my old hand held one lying about somewhere, not being used if you want it.
Don't tempt me, Brian. I'll steal all your plants, all your gizmos, all of it.
And there are loads of other shorter flowers that I grow. Well, they're not all flowers, really. A lot of them are foliage plants to highlight the snowdrops. Like, for instance, the black grass, a fire pogon, and another dark foliage plant, Lunaria annua Ched Glow, which comes through with almost purpley black foliage. So you get little mounds of foliage with white snowdrops.
That's clever.
Yeah, lots of variegated things like hepaticas that have got small variegated leaves, and ranunculus that have got small variegated leaves. Not the celandine that goes absolutely everywhere. I mean, the modern hybrids, the double-flowered forms, are much better. But I have got some nice variegated ones which are a bit thuggish, and you have to keep an eye on. I rather like heucheras. So I mean, there are an awful lot of different sorts of heucheras. So I've got a nice one called Creme Brulee, which you would like, Thordis, because it's the right colours. And then we've got one called David. I have no idea why we got that one. That's
always nice to pay homage to the other half.
Well, quite. And that was on the Hardy Plant Society's endangered list. And so we were getting it as a conservation plant to bulk up and pass on. And there are loads of others like that. And then I've got things like Arabis. I think I showed on Instagram a picture of Galanthus Matt Bishop with an Arabis which has the most wonderful name, Ferdinandi Coburgi Old Gold.
Sounds like a member of the German royal family.
I know. We grew it on for the Hardy Plant Society when the Norfolk group had a stand at Chelsea. And it was one that we grew on here, and so we were allowed to keep a plant. So that was quite nice. There's a lovely yellowish carex, if you know it, Alan. It's Carex oshimensis everillo.
Yeah.
I think that's nice because in the springtime you've got the dark soil, you've got this light green carex foliage, so that looks good. You've got hecatias, Hecatia, yes, that's right, isn't it? Hecatia epipactis, and there's one called Thor, which is a really nice one to provide a bit of difference in the garden, and a euphorbia cross martini, Ascot rainbow.
Oh yes,
do you know that one?
Yeah,
I love
and
that.
in the cold, the foliage, which is variegated, can go red in the cold. So that's a nice contrast as well. And then you've got all sorts of things, because it's a long season for snowdrops, you see, because we're going from September to the end of March, beginning of April, there's all sorts of things that you can grow, like Adonis with the yellow flowers and the lovely foliage. And that looks really good with snowdrops. And then, of course, there's crocuses. And at the moment, the Crocus thomasinius are just beginning to start here. And I grow a lovely pale mauvey marked one called Crocus huefluensis shockwave, which looks stunning with primulas. And primulas, of course, look good with snowdrops. Anemones are beginning to bud up now and start to show colour, and so we get those. And another really good foliage plant for snowdrops is flowers, obviously Hellebores, but there is a lovely foliage Hellebore which is Multifidus subspecies Herzegovina, which has very fine leaves. You know, they're really, can't think what the word is. Do you know, Alan?
Lanceolate?
Yes, I suppose they are lanceolate leaves. It's a super thing because it's quite different to the other Hellebores. You don't really grow it for the flowers. You grow it for the leaf
I saw
structure.
one somewhere the other day where the leaves were actually just like fuzzy little tentacles.
Yeah, well, it's probably that.
Yes.
I know Rosie grows it and John Morley grows it, and lots of people will grow it, of course. And then we've got one called Pink Ice, which came from Ashwoods, from John Massey's nursery, and it's an interspecific hybrid of Nigocors and Tibetanus. Well, I can't grow Tibetanus very well, but Pink Ice is sort of like a larger version of that. So I grow that in a pot by the back door. It's a lovely thing. So there are all sorts of other things. Corydalis will be coming up soon. And you get all the different foliage, different flower colours of that. There's a lovely one called Popovii, which I grow, which is a white with sort of maroony tips. There's Corn's purple, Craigton blue. There's common or garden yellows and whites. There's lovely reds like Gandalf. There's no end of those.
And obviously, you know, the flowers and Corydalis are beautiful, but the clump of spinners I have, the foliage of that is looking so beautiful in the little raised bed with my snowdrops nearby. So it's
there's one thing you haven't mentioned here, Brian, yet, and I know that you've got quite a few different varieties. That's aconites.
Aconites.
Don't get me started.
Well, yes, I could say that, couldn't I?
Yes.
At the moment, we have one or two aconites out. We've had Winterzauber out for quite a while. Silicica has just come out. Duse is on the point of opening. Lady Lamortagna is about to open. Ewan Bunclark is in bud. The one that I'm desperate to see in the garden is the one with the dreadful name Andanken and Johannes Rashka, which won't be how you pronounce it, pound to a penny, but it's a real greeny one and costs the earth because it's very, very slow to increase. Some of them increase really quickly, like Schwefelglans and Pauline. And in the garden,
very pretty.
It is. And if you are very clever, because I wasn't, this was sheer luck.
Everybody needs a bit of that.
I happened to be growing Galanthus Ecuson d'Or, which is a nivalis, which was found by Mark Brown, Matt Bishop, and Joe Sharman, I think, in Normandy, hence the French name Écusson d'Or, because it has yellow marks on the outers as well as the yellow inner. And I happened to be growing it, and I happened to plant Eranthis Pauline near it, and it's exactly the same colour. Just sheer happen chance. So when it's out in flower, it looks superb.
Yeah.
And I can't claim any kudos for that at all.
But you planted it.
Which is, of course, well, yes.
There's a lot of serendipity in gardening.
A lot of serendipity. It's a lovely word, serendipity, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. We have a bit of serendipity.
Is Pauline expensive? Because she is a sort of, I mean, before we go on to Flomo, she is a bit of a wish list plant.
Not if you know the right people. No, then Pauline's not expensive, I don't think, and Schwefelglans is not expensive. It's only when you come to things like Andenken and Johannes Rashka. It means something like in memory of Johannes Rashka, I think.
How much are we talking about with a winter aconite when we're saying expensive? Because obviously we have some grasp on how expensive a snowdrop might be.
Oh, 100. Some of them plus. You can pick up some of the really nice Eranthis. Like, I think Lady Lamortagna is about £20, something like that. Which, I mean, is not a bunch of flowers, is it? And, you know, a bunch of flowers is gone in a couple of weeks. But in the garden, you get it every year.
My philosophy entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all got to justify how, well, you know, why we spend quite so much money on a bulb.
No justification needed. You know what the Chinese say? Beware what you set your heart on, for you will surely have it. And it's very true.
It is.
I won't share that one with the other half.
Very wise.
He'll start to get worried.
They also have another saying. I think it's something like, you must love your garden and love your plants, but you must love your family more.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't heard that.
I'll put that on a sign to remind myself. Oh, Brian. Well, we all knew when we sat down to this podcast we'd end up with a lot of Flomo. I've seen Alan scribbling and scrawling his way through the past hour and more of you sharing plants and stories and coming up with all kinds of things. I don't write notes during the podcast. I can only say that there are so many plants that you grow that I want to grow. But my Flomo, and for anyone who's not tuned in before, that's that kind of fear of missing out you get about a flower or a plant. My Flomo is something you emailed me the other day, and you said, I saw this and thought of you. And
yes.
A rose called simply Catherine, Rosa Catherine, which is about as me as a rose gets. So they didn't really do it justice in the description on the website, because they said it was a sort of peach apricot, which didn't cover it because it had pink to it. It was ruffled. It was it looked like it had a slightly darker eye, but it was this sort of blousy affair in sunset shades, obviously appealing to me. It felt like a blousier, peachier version of For Your Eyes Only, which has that very, very distinctive dark eye to it. So that had to go. There we go. I mean, that's like me in a rose, really, isn't it? It's all the things I want.
There's a very good reason why it reminded you of For Your Eyes Only, because it's a Rosa persica, and all the Rosa persica have that eye in the centre of the flowers. So For Your Eyes Only is also a Rosa persica. And we happened to go to a talk on Rosa persicas by the new national collection holder, who's Daniel Myhill, who lives in Kenninghall. And he didn't, I don't think he showed Catherine, he might have done, but he was talking about his new national collection. And that's why I thought, oh, I know somebody who would like that one. But you have to be careful. You have to be careful because they come from mountainous regions and desert regions. And some of them are quite difficult to grow. So you have to be aware. You have to have the right position, right plant, right place, as always.
As always. Good old Beth Chatto. Brian, you alluded earlier to the fact that Alan had nearly outed your Flomo. So, drum roll, what is it?
Well, I have loads of Flomo. I mean, I always have. It's a Flomo that I've had for a long time, and it's all down to our mutual friend, the late Anne Borrell. Because in her front
yes, I know what it is.
In her front garden is, well, I hope still is, Daphne Belua Gurkha. And Daphne Belua Gurkha flowers without the leaves at this time of the year. So it's a mass of whitish flowers, heavily centered. And it looks absolutely stunning in her garden, didn't it, Alan?
Yeah, it did. Absolutely amazing.
So that's all been on my wish list for a long, long time, as has Prunus Mumi Beni Chidori, which I know I can't grow because it's going to get too big.
That is a lovely plant, though.
Which is a shame. But I have a small plant on my wish list as well, which is a funny thing. It's a cardamine or cardamine, however you want to pronounce it, which is also known as dentaria, and it's Eniaphilos, which is a whitish yellow one. And I came to this through another great Snowdrop friend, Anne Repnow from Germany, who wrote a wonderful book called about, what did she call it? Hang on. Good job you can edit these things. Oh dear. You wouldn't think in a small space you could lose so much stuff.
Oh, I do.
This is a lovely book on snowdrops, beautifully illustrated. Anne is a German galanthophile. Look at that. Isn't that lovely?
It is.
It's a super book. And the nicest thing about it is she tells you what the plant is, and she marks it for three things: the price, whether it's cheap or middle-sized or expensive, whether it blooms early in the main season or late, and how vigorous it is. So, I mean, it's a really useful book, and she's a lovely lady, and we are so excited because we're going to meet her soon. Never met her before. And then the other day, I did see one other thing that I would quite like to grow with my snowdrops, because it's a blue flower. And I mean, everybody likes blue flowers, don't they? It's Wolfenia cross Schwarzii. And I will leave you to look it up and find a picture, because it has a little cluster of blue flowers, and it's reasonably short, so it will look good, I think, with the snowdrops. And one aconite, lemon and lime. Now, lemon and lime is a newish aconite which arose in Rod Leeds' garden. And Rod Leeds is a wonderful plantsman. So that's one to add to my little collection of aconites.
I think this might be one of the finest Flomo sections we have ever had. That is some top-notch Flomoing for February. I love it. Top-notch
you
February
know what
Flomo.
the Chinese say. You know what the Chinese say.
So, Alan, how on earth can you possibly pick out some Flomos?
Oh, I'm exhausted. Because there's just so much. I mean, the Rhodia Talbot Manor, Rhodia. And how do you say it? Rhodia.
Well, I say Rhodia. They're Japanese, basically. Japanese woodlanders. And they present them in a pot. You know, they have extraordinary exhibitions with enormous numbers of these variegated plants.
Yeah. They do the same similar things with hepaticas, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I mean, they're woodland plants, Rhodia.
Yeah. Well, that's on my list. I've got to see if I can find that somewhere. I'm not going to go on too much because there's so many. But I'm going to go back to my original thing, which was vigorous clump-forming snowdrops. Everybody can understand what I mean. And after the lovely tale of you with Sir Nicholas Bacon and him giving you one bulb, which took your 2 arms to lift, I think I would like to be able to buy a substantial amount, and I'm probably talking about 20 pots of something called Ace of Spades.
Right.
How many pots of Ace of Spades can you muster, Brian?
None.
You.
I've got a little place, and it's somewhere where I pass by every day. I've just cleared a small piece of woodland out, let in a lot more light, and it's this bare piece of ground just looking at me. I could plant other things there, so it doesn't have to be snowdrops, but in my mind it has to be snowdrops. And I would just like a fairly vigorous snowdrop that I can fill this patch of ground with. And okay, 20 pots would probably be somewhat sparse for the first 2 or 3 years, but after that, I could just have this vision of a carpet forming, shall we say?
Carpet forming. Well, there are several that I can think of that are older varieties, so they're not desperately expensive. And there are things like Colossus, Sentinel, easy growing, quick to clump up, very nice looking. I think they'd suit you.
I think they would.
They're not what you would call extraordinary snowdrops. They're good, tried, tested snowdrops.
But I would also like to have Ace of Spades, even if it's in smaller quantities.
And what the heart desires.
Yes, indeed.
Before we wrap things up and before we leave the subject of snowdrops, for a future time when I am buying more snowdrops, the sort of green tear type, Rosemary Burnham type green snowdrop, what is the most vigorous of those?
Well, green tear is quite vigorous, you know.
It is. Yeah. That was found in a woodland by Heuchera.
I think I started off with one bulb here, and everybody, I daren't tell people what I paid for it, to be quite honest, because it was expensive.
It was well over £100.
It was more than several £100. Yeah, it was in those days. And I thought, a bit like your conker tail, Brian, I thought, well, if I lose this thing, people are going to laugh at me and say, silly old fool, look, he spent all that money and it died. Ha, ha, ha. But it didn't. It grew very, very well. And then we already mentioned Chopper Roof on this program. Well, Chopper Roof, as you know, he comes and helps me in the garden sometimes. And I was looking out very early one year for my green tear, and there was nothing there. And I said to him one day, I said, do you know what happened to green tear? Oh, he said, didn't I tell you I've divided it? So he dug them up, divided it, put them somewhere else in the garden without telling me. I didn't know, but I got a lovely surprise because suddenly I had this larger spread of green tear.
Oh, wonderful.
And they very quickly bulk up.
Yeah.
Something went through my head just then. I mean, if you want something that's quite showy, I would go for something in the trumps line, like Trumpalute or Trim Ingram. That's a very quick to increase one. And you know, you've got the green and white that you can see then.
Yeah.
So that'd be quite a good one, I think.
Well, wish list. So much FLOMO, Brian.
Oh, absolutely.
And if people want more of that in their life, then follow Galanthaholic on Instagram, where pretty much every day there's something that you wish you were growing, and what the heart desires, you can then hopefully get hold of. Thank you so much, Brian. It has been as joyful as I expected. Welcome. I'm sorry I've been sneezing and blowing my nose throughout. It wasn't ideal, but.
It happens.
But I have absolutely loved this as even more, I think, than I'd expected, and I expected a lot. So thank you for getting all these plants together. We're all just going to go and lay down in a darkened room to recover, I think.
Oh, no, I'm going to go and get on the computer and find out where I can find some of these lovely things.
How much money will Alan have spent by afternoon? We'll have to find out.
It's only money.
Until next time, happy gardening, everybody.
Happy gardening. Lovely to see you, Brian. All the best.
Breaks away from the receptacle.
Oh, we lost you, Brian. We lost you right in the middle of your Lydia Diana story.
Is that it? It's in front of me, so I can't see. Oh, there it is.
There we go.
One called, the sun.
I told you.
I better pull the curtain, otherwise we won't be able to see what we're doing.
Blinded by the light.
Mine's gone a blank now. What's this one?
Can't give me a chance to blow my nose. Oh, he's off. You've lost Alan. He's disappeared. I finished my tissues. This is a disaster.
Oh dear.
Everyone's left. If you hear any funny noises, by the way, it's not me. It's the dog's having a dream next to me on the sofa. So if you hear any funny squeaking noises, it's not like...
Thank God you told us that.
What do you cook that's green and goes all shriveled and dark?
Like wilted spinach.
That's it, spinach. God damn. I'm getting old.